Your epic adventure has gone from imagination to a stack of materials ready for a gaming table. You have your players, you have teased out your campaign, everyone is chomping at the bit, ready to go. Your Session 0 was nothing short of stellar success, and now it's too late to turn back because Session number 1 is right around the corner. Better get prepping. So grab a pen and paper and your Dungeon Master's Guide because it's your campaign. Part 2, the keys to game prep, this week on the Dungeon Master's Dojo.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Dungeon Masters Dojo podcast. This is a show for game masters, as well as experienced and new players alike. We hope to bring you the tools needed to not only be a great GM, but to help you develop as a player. I'm your host, Louis Aponte. Our stars of the show are Scott Labby and Bill Robotile. Let's enter the dojo and see what both Bill and Scott have in store for us today. Bill, Scott, how's it going today?
I'm absolutely wonderful.
Fantastic.
Good, I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, we're still talking your campaign, and that's fun. We're moving right along.
We are. It's part 2. We have a keychain full of keys, and we're going to be passing them out and talking about each key and what it opens.
Keys to game preparation. I love preparation, getting ready for the game.
Well, you and I both, but it plays very well to our self-imposed OCDs.
I guess when you guys are talking about keys, what do you mean?
The different points along the progression, the planning, what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, where it works best. So these are the integral points that you need to tick off.
And how to be good at it.
And how to be good at it.
Because that's the most important thing, because you can over-prepare and you can under-prepare. So you need something in the middle. And that's what we're hoping to give today. Support the Dungeon Masters Dojo by heading over to Apple Podcasts and Podchaser and leave a review. Take the time to leave a comment as well. This helps make us more searchable to those listeners interested in content such as ours. But more importantly, we want to know how we are doing and what topics you would like to hear about.
Another way you can support the DMD is with a small monthly donation, so we can continue to deliver quality content to you, our listeners. This also helps us to upgrade and replace equipment. Head over to Anchor, to the Dungeon Masters Dojo page, and click the support button. And now, onto this week's episode.
So back to what we were talking about. So I guess you guys, you plan out your key events and then what will happen at the game session?
Yeah, game night's coming, and you better be prepared. And that afternoon is not enough time to prepare.
Not even close.
Not if you're going to run an engaging game. And why bother if you're not going to run an engaging game? You want to leave your players wanting more, and wanting more in a good way. So you got to do the prep work. You have to. It's not something you can get away with.
You need to plan it all out. I mean, I start with the draw. How do you get them in? I mean, you had your Session 0. They're all introduced. You may have hinted at what your plot is at, but the draw is what starts it. That's all right. This is what gets them all hooked, and this is where they go, oh, wow, this sounds interesting. So not only are the characters wanting to progress, but the players want to progress. And that's a lot of it, too, because let's face it, your PCs are driven by your characters. If your characters aren't interested, then obviously your PCs are just going to be fiddling around. So let's get them all hooked up. And the draw is the first thing that I usually go. Yeah,
I work off an outline. Both Bill and I have mentioned countless times the bullet points, the infamous sheets of bullet points. And that's the outline I work off of.
Yep.
So when referring to these bullet points, you need to now take pen to paper and plan out the key events for your game session, the one that you're going to run. Ideally, this is weeks in advance, or at the very least, a week before your game session happens.
A day or two out just isn't going to give you the time. Scott and I have both been doing this a long time. We both have a formula we use. We develop these independently, and it just turns out we both use the same method, which is how when we write, things go so well for us because we think along the same lines.
Yeah, reading out of the same book and the same page, and
exactly.
That helps tremendously.
So let's pop a couple key events then. All right, how what I look at? I look at the draw first, then the conundrum. What's the problem? From there, we'll go to what I refer to as my Kobayashi Maru. Give them something that seems unsolvable, and let them find their way out of it. That is both combat and non-combat. Then I'll give them the final confrontation and then a conclusion. And it sounds pretty simple and easy. It is not. But these are what I build off of when I build mine. I assume you have something similar?
I go through and I determine what my combat encounters are, my role-playing encounters, plot hooks, and the whatnot. I like to use a formula of an encounter takes roughly an hour. That doesn't mean that every single encounter I expect to take an hour, because some will take more, some will take less.
A lot less, we've seen.
Yeah, a lot less. But at the end of the day, it kind of balances it out. So if I'm doing a 4-hour game session, which is about what we average when we do Monday nights, I'm looking at 4 encounters that are going to forward the story, and maybe a fifth I'll keep in my back pocket just in case someone throws a crazy Ivan in there and takes down my big bad in record time.
Or even your medium bad somewhere in encounter number 2.
Because sometimes that happens. Now, when we do our long game sessions and we're running stuff for 8 hours a day at least,
for 12 to 16 people on 2 different tables running simultaneous and parallel plot lines,
we're looking at about 40 to 45 encounters per table. So that's writing out
That's a lot.
That's a lot. It's a lot of writing, and I guess had I put as much effort into my academics as I do into writing those week-long adventures, I would have gotten an education much longer ago.
You'd be a doctorate by now.
And balance, I think, is really good with your game session, because there's some game sessions, like we've had a whole day at my table on our week-long getaway where it's been nonstop brutality and combat, but you can't do that every day.
But at least you took time out for a big gala event and a dinner. Oh wait, that was combat too.
Yes,
Hello.
That was.
I'm sorry, couldn't be helped.
So I like to balance it with combat, role playing, plot hooks, and sometimes your plot hooks and your role playing encounters turn into combat encounters depending on who happens to be sitting at your table at the time. Sometimes your players will turn those role-playing encounters into combat encounters.
Yes.
But I like to throw at least one combat encounter in there, just so things move along a little bit. And
let's face it, you don't walk around with swords and flails and bows and stuff like that and spells without wanting to use them once in a while.
Yeah. At least once in a while.
So
sometimes all the time.
That's the formula we use pretty consistently, and it's panned out very, very well for us over the course of the 12 years we've been doing the week long, and then beyond that as well. But all right, so on to the next one. Your key NPCs. So where do you go with that?
And how do you even develop those key guys? What's your motive behind them?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is, you know what your encounters are going to be because you've pretty much set up your key events. Now you need to populate your events, basically give a color. Your events are your broad strokes. Now let's fine tune it a little bit, and that becomes your contacts, your guides, informants. Your NPCs are both diversion, who's going to pass on what information, materials, things like that. So this again, helps further the plot. It helps further the development of the characters, even if it's not plot driven. They still got to go to the store. They still have to buy things. They still want things. So you still have the NPCs that have to sell them. We've already mentioned developing NPCs in another episode where this is the bread and butter of your world.
Yeah, it's the people that live there.
It's the people that live there. It's everyone they meet. Your world is a chunk of earth, water, wind, vegetation, but all it is just a giant Garden of Eden, and you're all alone if you don't have NPCs in there. It's every other person in the entire world for.
So it's important to know your NPCs, know who they are, what they are, how they act, and like Bill said, we go through this in our NPCs episode. So check that out if you have any questions, because it'll answer a lot of your questions. Go ahead and place them in their locations, where they're going to be, and have a few notes next to their stat blocks. They should always have stat blocks. And my stat blocks are very simplistic for my NPCs. I don't do hit points. I don't do hit dice. I do hits. This is usually how many hits it's going to take this particular NPC out. Their stat blocks for me are very simple. What kind of damage they do, and what sort of skills they might have.
Because they're not, I mean, in most cases, you're not going to need hit points unless lose on your table. So, yeah, a quick, simple stat block works out really, really well.
And these are my delivery system for plot hooks as well. The NPCs are great for that.
Yeah, it would suck having to go to the bulletin board in the town square every time you want to move them along.
Yeah, and know their, have notes on their personality. It doesn't have to be really deep or specific. Don't spend a lot of time on it. If they speak in a specific accent, if they're gruff, if they're, a cranky old guy, if, they're an old matronly type, just those quick little notes so you can know how to portray them when that time comes. And that way, if they ever travel back to wherever it was these NPCs are, you still have notes, so you have consistency with your key NPCs.
So it sounds like you're creating just like the beginnings of a playing character. It's
Yes.
Yeah. You're starting
in layman's terms.
Notes.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Cliff notes on a PC.
The beginnings of a character, and just not flushing them out fully because it would take too much time.
And we've mentioned before, a lot of times these NPCs actually turn out to be PCs for one of the other players. It's happened a number of times. Or you turn it into a reoccurring NPC, so you need to stat him out all the way because he's interacting with the player characters as a player character. So, but like I said, the Cliff Notes work really well.
So it's just the beginning.
Yeah, and I've played at tables with DMs that when they made NPCs, they were making player characters, and that's just way too much work. You could be spending all that time
making a story.
Making a story,
building a new monster.
Yep,
creating a unique magic item.
So just the Cliff Notes on your NPCs.
That's all you're really going to need. Let's go on to the next one. Plan out your key plot hooks and place them.
So what are your key plot hooks? That's probably the first question you should ask. They can either be for the session, a month's worth of sessions, or for the overall campaign. But know where they are and place those key plot hooks throughout your session or sessions.
Absolutely. This is also one of the first real chances to use the backgrounds from the characters. This is probably the first real meat of it, where you can get into and delve into their backgrounds really, really hard and start drawing out some of these backgrounds and place them along, like you said, whether it's just for that particular encounter, for that evening, for the the scenario, for something that's going to carry on to the next scenario. All right, we're going to be using these characters in the next scenario as well. This is just episode 1. It'll last 8 weeks, and then we go on to the next one. Well, maybe one of these points is the whole thing's going to revolve around to build plot hooks for the second session. But you can start bringing stuff in now.
Yeah, and don't waste those opportunities.
No, by all means. This is one of the first places to use them.
Yeah, and you don't have to go all in right off the bat.
No.
You just establish maybe a couple people or aspects from player character's background, but that's enough to pique a little bit of interest. Your player's going to sit there and go, I wonder what he's going to do with this information I gave him now that he's kind of touched upon it.
Oh, yeah, a little suspense, a little anticipation.
Yeah, you don't want to show the monster in the first act of the movie.
Oh, no.
You gotta wait a while. Build that suspense.
Think of Jaws. What is it, 1974? You didn't see the creature until 3/4 of the movie was over.
Yeah.
And it was once you heard that music, man, you knew it was there.
Here he comes.
And you're like, nope, they didn't show it again, but
I can't look.
Ate poor Robert Shaw.
My
favorite character in the whole movie.
On the plus side, the shark blew up almost immediately, so it didn't have chance to get drunk off of Robert Shaw.
Yes.
So it's just...
Or perhaps it blew up so easily because it was drunk off Robert Shaw.
Okay, so
what kind of plot hooks do you throw in there?
Oh, well, I mean, obviously we talked about the background, but you're going to... Some of the plot hooks are going to be how to drive your story in as far as broad strokes. Then you're also going to want to throw some plot hooks to drive the individual player characters. Not all at once. You don't want to throw everybody on board, but pick a couple of your player characters and draw them into the story and let them bring the other PCs with them. And then the next session, pick another one or two and draw them in off their backgrounds or something that's happened or the interactions between the player characters. Use that as well in concert with the the scenario you've already set up and try to blend that in. And now, a lot of times these things will happen. You can sit on them. You got another week until your next gaming session. In most cases, you got time to think about it. How am I going to draw them in, and how am I going to blend these together? Sometimes they'll do it for you, but even if they don't, there's some information there that they're handing you. Use it.
Well, just as an example, we'll talk about one of our characters' backgrounds or backstories, just to see, so people get a better understanding of what we're talking about. Iskander, we knew she was a librarian. She had other skills behind that, but how did you put her story into the game? Now, you know what her backstory was.
Yeah. We get the backstory. We've mentioned this before. We get backstories before the campaign starts so that we can review those backstories and find places to add the backstory to the overall campaign. So with Iskander, she was a librarian, and she had a particular skill set that she developed outside of academia, and she dabbled a lot in things. So she was adept in roguery, but she also had some arcane knowledge, so she could cast some spells. So she had a mentor, an older wizard type, and I thought this was really a good opportunity to play around with her backstory, because Corrick had written a backstory that kind of spoke to me, and I was like, "Ooh, I think I could really play around with this and have a good time with it." And I really liked his portrayal of the character. It was really tastefully done, and so that's what I did. So at the end of one of our long sessions, I had her old mentor be part of this clandestine plot to bring this old god back into the world, and they succeeded, and it had the effect I thought it would have. She was pissed, and I think Corrick was also intrigued, and she had found a magic item that was an earth elemental that when you whispered a person's name, it would go after them and attack them. So that's precisely what she did before they passed through a portal to escape, because there was a massacre happening after that, and we kind of forgot about that part of the story. But we had just finished a story focused on Iskander 2 weeks ago, and the story involved her old master, and I brought him in because they never had that moment where they could meet one another and sort things out.
Or like closure.
Yeah, there was no closure, which I love doing, because I want people to kind of forget about it and think, oh, it's just a loose end. I always like to tie up the loose ends. And so when the big reveal happened that he was one of the people kind of involved in this situation, his whole side of his face was all scarred up and mangled from that earth elemental. And even though it was like an online game, I could see the look on Corrick's face when I brought that up, and he immediately recognized what that was referencing to. And they had their moment, and she defeated her mentor, who was kind of a cruel mentor to her, and also someone whose philosophy on things was diametrically opposed to hers. So she had that moment of closure, which was really, really cool and very satisfying, I think, for Corrick as a player.
But this played out over quite some time.
It was a couple years.
And that's the point.
Years.
That's the point, where your plot hooks aren't necessarily rapid fire by any means. You want to dribs and drabs and here and there, and to keep the intrigue level high, keep the interest level high, and that was masterfully done. By the way, thank you.
Thank you. You just want to give them enough every now and again to go, oh, they're still paying attention.
Yeah.
Still paying attention.
Yeah, even with everything that was going on, because when that first started, that was it was armies of people that were fighting. He had to have other sets of eyes say, hey, look who's over there, because he didn't notice that at first. And he was like, oh my God, what's going on? and you could see that it perked him up into the game. It actually, I think, drew him into the game.
Yeah, because Iskander was played just like everybody else.
You're right.
And
But her on a more personal level.
it was personal for her because she was played by someone who, even though he was not a very nice person, there was still some history and probably some feelings like a mentor or a mentee would have for their mentors.
A certain level of respect, if not necessarily admiration, certainly respect.
So it was very personal, and Cork did a fantastic job of portraying that at the gaming table.
Moral of your story: use your plot hooks.
Always, and use your players' backgrounds because there's a tremendous amount of satisfaction in tying up those loose ends from someone's history.
Well, I think that using the backgrounds also brings depth to the game. It's it just adds more livelihood to the game, more realism.
Yeah, and it does. It furthers the story. I mean, we've added elements from a previous campaign where everybody was pretty much, the majority of the characters were dead. Mm-hmm. We've added those elements in our newer campaign to start to tie up some loose ends that were left from that. And it did. It added an extra layer of depth to the world, the overall storyline. And for those players who played those characters and were playing new characters, I think there was a certain amount of satisfaction from that.
It also gives a level of validity to the second session because there's familiarity tied with the first session. So everyone's like, well, gee, that first one was so freaking awesome. How are they going to beat that? And being able to relate to the first 7-year session by tying it into the second, that gave a certain amount of validity and made the transition a little easier for the seasoned players, the new players, newer people that we brought in, which is why we started the second session. It was no big deal for them. They had to be reminded, oh, by the way, that's what this means. But for the vast majority of our group, that first session was, set the bar, and that gave the validity to the second and made it a little bit more easy to digest.
I think that was well put.
All right, so let's move on to the next one. Key documents. What are you going to need in front of yourself here as the player, as the game master, to make sure you got all your ducks in a row? First off, the scenario.
Yeah, that's probably the most important one.
You don't got no game without a scenario.
That's right.
That's it. Write out your scenario. For me, next, maps.
Yeah,
I'm the map dude. I love my maps. So maps would be the next one. Then I start getting into like your encounters, specifics on your encounters. So you have your scenario, but make sure you have your documentation for your monsters, for anything they're going to be. Your maps are also going to be your buildings, your stable, the roads, waterways, boats, whatever else you need. Make sure those are ready. What do you got? I got a few more listed, but what do you got?
Handouts. Anywhere you go in the world, people always file handouts in the trash can on their way out of wherever they are. But at the game table, players love handouts. They love those maps. They love letters,
cheat sheets.
When as a matter of fact, it's a good thing you mentioned that, because when we first started with 5th edition, we handed out a bunch of cheat sheets because we knew we were going to use them. I like having random encounters. I always have random encounters handy because I may plan extra encounters, and there's just some days, well, every day my dice are against me, but there are some days that things move faster than others. So having those random encounters are super important for me.
Well, they move faster because of someone else's dice, not yours.
Yeah. Well, my dice suck. They're not nice. But random encounters, I've always had a great deal of success with random encounters, because even if I'm running ahead, I'll pluck a random encounter out, making it not so random anymore, and put it somewhere in the campaign, and it's worked out. It's worked out pretty well. I mean,
we both do the same thing, and you have a random encounter. You know what your cheat sheet is full of them, and a circumstance will come up going, oh, this would be a perfect place for that random encounter.
And that's where Higgardine came from.
And that's no longer random. That's where now it's part of the plot. So,
and that random encounter stemmed from the table moving a little quicker than I expected, and that character I named the random encounter the Last Stand of Higurdine the Brave because I figured he was going to die.
He was supposed to.
And the party obliterated what he was fighting against and took him and healed him, and he became an NPC that went with the party, and then he became quite possibly one of my favorite PCs at the table when Matt adopted him.
Yes.
And it was I don't know, still he has since passed.
Here's some tissues.
Yes.
And it was awful to see that happen.
I kind of enjoyed it because that's how I felt what you guys did to me in the first 7 years.
Well, I guess I had that coming.
Well, you got it twofold because you got it from me at one table, and you got it from him on the epilogue.
I was not happy.
Yeah. But I love having my stuff all organized in a nice, neat folder and ready to go, so I know what to pull out of where.
A couple other things. Make sure you have your magic items. If you have some magic items you're giving out, even if it's out of the book, don't look through the book for it. Have it written out ahead of time. That way you have it ready to go. And have your PC's stats and information. Like you say, you use a Game Master Shield. He has it out, all that stuff already in the back. But if you don't, have it written out. Know what your player characters have, for basic abilities, stats, pluses, minuses, weapons, just little quick sheets on everybody. So that way you're not looking for stuff all the time. It helps expedite the play, keeps things moving, makes you look like you know what you're doing. But as part of your documents, make sure you know what your player characters have, not just you.
And slowing down the game by looking through a book for a description on a magic item.
Exactly.
Or through a stack of papers that are unorganized. It slows the game right down, and once you start slowing the game down, you begin to lose player interest, and that's hard to build up that momentum again.
It breaks the flow. I know where it is on my clipboard.
Yeah, Flous interruptus is a bad thing.
Flous interruptus is a bad thing. So,
and there's no pill to cure it yet. So remember that.
So you have your maps, you have your magic, you have your monsters, you have your encounters, your information on your player characters. Everything's all laid out in front of you. So make sure you have your documents ready. And at this point, speaking of documents, I got a little paperwork to do myself. So let's take a break.
Support the Dungeon Masters Dojo by heading over to Apple Podcasts and Podchaser and leave a review. Take the time to leave a comment as well. This helps make us more searchable to those listeners interested in content such as ours. But more importantly, we want to know how we are doing and what topics you would like to hear about.
Another way you can support the DMD is by buying the DMD a beer, so we can continue to deliver quality content to you, our listeners. This also helps us upgrade and replace equipment. Head over to buymeacoffee.com/thedmd and buy us a beer, or 3, or 5. Don't forget to say something nice or mean. We don't care. You're buying us a beer. Now on to this week's episode.
And we're back.
Much better.
And, we're talking adversaries. Every Batman has their Joker. Mm-hmm. Every Scott has their Lou.
Oh,
Every Superman
has their Lex
for all
those
Luthor.
Scotts. Yeah, we're beating you up.
Identify who the bad guy is going to be.
Yes.
Well, bad guy's not always bad.
Identify who the adversary is going. Yeah, we'll go back to Killmonger in Black Panther. Not what I would call a bad guy. No, I can relate to that adversary. Yeah, I
Protagonist.
Antagonist.
Antagonist. Oh, yeah, antagonist, yes.
So, yeah, I mean, that makes for a good adversary.
Yes.
It does.
And we talked about that, too, in our NPC episode. But once you identify who they are, regardless of who that is, be it your big bad or your moderately sized bad, know them. You don't want to go flipping through books or reams of paper. Know who they are, what their motivations are.
This is one of the NPCs that you're really going to want to develop, like you would a player character, because you're going to need the spell list as your big bad. You're going to need to know their stats, because they're going to be combat against this person, usually.
Well, I think there's a little bit more to it sometimes. I think sometimes it's not just knowing them, it's owning them and playing them to their true potential.
Absolutely.
Ownership
Yep.
is key, and you're absolutely right, because if they're the adversary for the session, then what's going to make them adversarial? And that, tactics. If it's a fighter, you're going to want to know what their tactics are.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to eliminate the healer first, or they're going to focus on the spellcaster, or they'll call out what appears to be the most skilled warrior in the group, be it the barbarian, the paladin, the fighter, whatever, and call them out mano-y-mano and handle them thusly. But know them. Know what their tactics are. Know what makes them special. Know what makes them particularly dangerous.
And then you have to deal with all their underlings. Who you're being chased by, who you're being harried by, who's out there softening you up. So make sure you know who the adversaries are, but at all levels. Yeah, you want to really develop your big bad, and maybe his lieutenant or sergeant or something like that. But there's always going to be the minions.
Yeah.
So and you don't have to stat them out as much, but know who's going to do and where they're going. Are they going to be reoccurring? Is there going to be different ones? If it's different people doing different things, and are they just having a bad day, or are they actually being sought after? And and maybe it is. Maybe they're just having a bad day. But they won't know that until later on when the plot develops, saying, oh, no, this is all being happened because of this one individual or this small group or this clandestine organization is all doing this against us. They'll put those pieces together eventually, if you write your story well. But you need to make sure you got the minions down, too.
Yeah, and your adversary doesn't necessarily have to be someone who is going to endanger you. It could be the tax collector. Maybe your party is entering a city or a town of some substantial size, and there you have the tax collector who charges you to come in to the city. And then maybe he will charge you a tax on every weapon you carry, and maybe he will issue you a fine for dressing above your station. Maybe he will frequently be encountered throughout their stay in the city to charge your players for any number of things.
Oh, every time a spell is cast.
Yep, that's a
fine.
That's fine. No spell casting.
No spell casting. And your spellcasters are going to cast anyways.
Yep. Your adversaries don't necessarily have to be someone that's going to engage them in combat. Perhaps it's an illness or a disease that your cleric has to figure out how to contain.
Mm-hmm.
It could be any number of things.
Well, I got one for you that you're going to like. Terrain, obstacles.
Yeah, and that could be a huge adversary,
mm-hmm.
depending on the terrain type or the season.
Yeah, from point A to point B. Oh, all you got to do is just go over the mountain.
Yeah, that's it. Piece of cake.
Yeah, it's January 15th.
Yep.
And there was just 4 feet of snow drop last night. But, hey, that's okay. The big storm isn't coming for a while, so you should be fine.
Yeah, the goats do fine up there.
Oh,
so
yeah.
You guys
yeah,
should be just fine. And I think you really want to be careful. You don't want to show your whole hand.
Oh, by no means. Yeah, you want to put it out there in pieces and piece it together.
The big bad should be dessert. Maybe you catch a glimpse of him, or you hear him or her. Maybe he or she will speak through a minion, or you'll get the Emperor Palpatine kind of hologram or spell type thing related to that. But never pull them out like in the beginning. That's the end. That's the icing on the cake.
Exactly.
But in the meantime, those minions and flunkies, well, they're fair game.
And should be plenty of them. All right, so now it's time to put pen and paper and write out your campaign. We've talked a bunch of times about bullet points and how we arrange things to make it quick, easier, and move things along. So what else are we going to put on our piece of paper besides our bullet points?
Well, campaign notes.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to want those campaign notes, those bullet points you were talking about. So your prep, of course, should not happen all on game day. Get it done before, because if you are unfortunate enough to be an adult like us, there's things that pop up. So make sure you do that a couple days in advance. It affords you the opportunity to review those notes and bullet points and to do so a couple times.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's important. And in doing so and reading it a couple times over will identify some things that you may have missed, things that may not necessarily work for the direction of the campaign, because the campaign's also driven by the players. So what they did last week probably didn't have anything to do with the direction you thought it was going to be going in. So you might be on a different trajectory.
Time to reestablish.
Yeah.
This is also a good place to put any specific dialogue. As much as we hate the dialogue boxes, sometimes there's dialogue that has to be transferred. Information, stuff like that. So this is where you write out your dialogue, have it ready, and waiting. Don't rely on, I'll remember it.
Because you won't.
Yeah, no.
Yep.
Especially when you're ancient like me. I don't remember jack shit. So write it down, as well as your encounter setups, the stats necessary for those, and any detailed descriptions on anything that is specific, because there might be points in those descriptions that are hints, plot hooks, things like that. So they'll learn to listen to the detailed descriptions, because like, okay, he's taking a little extra time here. There's something in there we need to know. And it's another way to draw them back into the game, especially if you're describing to one player character and some of the others aren't really, they're over having dialogue, they're making baked potatoes, who knows what they're doing sometimes when they're not paying attention to the game. But all of a sudden this detailed, slow, methodic, and then this, and then this, and you see this, and you smell, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, we should be paying attention. This is one of those important times. So it's another way to kind of draw them back in. So the detailed descriptions are another thing you should have ready and waiting on your, like I said, you can over-prepare. You don't want to do this for everything. But when you're trying to transfer some information from point A to point B, you being point A and them being point B, go to a detailed description, and they'll get into the habit of listening for it. And when you start going into that dialogue, they're going to know, all right, I better shut the hell up and pay attention. Yeah,
a lot of it is knowing where to put that extra effort in.
Oh yeah.
You don't want to be that DM again that shows up with a stack of NPCs that are fully fleshed out PCs. You want to know, okay, this needs a little extra attention.
Yeah, if you're showing up for just this night and you got a 3-ring binder that's almost full, you've over-prepared a bit.
Yeah, and that could be just as fatal to a campaign as under-preparation.
Absolutely. So, read your campaign notes and encounters a few times before the game session. We've already went over this. And make sure you didn't miss any of your key points. This is time to make your corrections. It's also time to take a good look at your time management, because you've read through it a few times. You'll recognize the flow. This is how long it's going to, I think of how long it's going to take here, how long it's going to take here. This jumps to here. This refers to that. This is where you're going to be able to balance things out. And then also a good place for an overall distribution of assets that you're going to put out there. Assets being information, magic, places, friends, favors. Those are all assets. And this way you can say, well, gee, I'm awful magic heavy in the front and information heavy in the back. Maybe I need to shuffle a couple of these things around. So this is a good place to, like you said, read through it a couple of times. But these are some of the things you're looking for while you're reading through it.
Yeah, and you may have to move some encounters into this game session that were integral that didn't happen last game session.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing where to put those if you have to shuffle around some encounters is important as well.
Anything for this one? Anything else?
No.
All right.
I want to talk about the next one.
This is Lou's favorite.
Action!
Start your game with action!
Kapow!
Boom! Zowie!
Thunderwave!
Of course. Descriptive and fast-paced right off the bat will help draw your players in. Let's face it, first impressions, right? Go for the wow factor.
Yeah. Start your campaign with action.
Yep.
How many times have you been at a movie and you are riveted because the movie starts with a car chase or a gunfight or a karate fight or some sort of awesome action-y thing, and you're like, okay, this is cool.
All the time.
Yeah, so
yeah, for the first half an hour, all you're doing is describing the town, the tavern, what everyone looks like, what color horse it is.
Boring.
Yeah. It's like,
someone's on their phone.
Yep.
texting, having dirty talk with their significant other.
Another one's upstairs for the third time in the bathroom.
In the bathroom.
He's probably going through your medicine cabinet, by the way.
Yeah.
Just start off with action. Hook them right in.
Yeah, if you're going to meet in a tavern, then have something action-oriented occur. The door is kicked open, and maybe it's dark out, it's winter, it's a new moon, so the moon is sitting in the sky, this big glowing orb, and there's snow on the ground. Someone stumbles into the tavern covered in blood and ripped to shreds, and then you're attacked by werewolves.
Well, that's better. I was just going to have a kitchen fire.
I like werewolves.
Well, we are getting close to October.
And then, we are. October's going to be fun.
They're both smiling already.
Yeah. It's going to be fun. And the crotchety old man in the corner who's sitting by the fire just says something like, "Well, the werewolves are back," and then your campaign starts. It doesn't have to mean combat either.
No, it doesn't. It just has to be fast paced action. Draw them in. Like I said, the car chase. The car chase doesn't always end in a car rolling over and exploding over a cliff. Yeah, sometimes you get away in a car chase.
Yeah.
But, all right, that sets it up, right? Why were you being chased? Who are you? Why were you running? Just really quick. The same thing would be a carriage ride. All of a sudden you see a carriage pull up in front. Get in, for God's sakes, get in. Some will, some may not. But the ones that do.
That'll be a contrarian.
Yep. Or your wild card who just blows the wheel off.
Not this wild card. He's getting in.
But, I mean, something like that. So your car chase becomes a carriage race.
Yeah, and who doesn't like a good carriage chase?
Yeah.
And then one of them plummeting off the edge of a cliff only to explode when they hit bottom.
Horses are very incendiary.
Yep. Foot chases are awesome. I love a good foot chase.
Yep.
Not like in real life, because I just don't have the cardio for that. I'm getting caught.
I think all three of us are getting caught.
You don't have to outrun the bear. You just have to outrun the person you're with.
Let's hope
all outrun Scott.
Let's hope when the zombie apocalypse comes, they're the slow moving variety. Otherwise, I'm in big trouble. But a good foot chase, across rooftops, through city streets and alleyways. That'll start it off.
Yep.
On a very actiony note.
So we've gone through quite a few keys here.
They jingle,
and we're handing them all to you. So we've given you all the keys you need to put your campaign in order. The people, places, and things all stand in the wings, ready for their cue. So grab that Trapper Keeper full of fantastic and whimsical ideas and head down the hall. Those keys are going to unlock the gates that lead to the big time. It's all waiting for you. The players, the DM snack bribes, and the big chair. So have a seat. It's time to run your game.
And that's Your Campaign, Part 2, The Keys to Game Prep. That's going to conclude this episode. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Please subscribe to the podcast for more great content. If you'd like to hear a particular topic, you can reach us out on Facebook at the Dungeon Masters Dojo, or you can drop us an email at thedungeonmastersdojo@gmail.com. Thank you, and have a good day.